The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Eric Coleman with IIST, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar, Innovation Thinking, Evolve and Expand Your Capabilities by Jennifer Bonine. We're excited you're able to join us today and set aside an hour to attend this webinar. This webinar is one of a series of free webinars to introduce the topics as well as the presenters of the upcoming SQTM conference in San Diego, California, September 13th through the 18th at the Sheraton San Diego Hotel and Marina. The conference focuses on advancing the test management and quality management professions by providing practical methods based on best practices. The ongoing theme of the conference, Practical, Proven, Feasible, keeps a focus on what works. To view the conference program and more information, visit www.qualitymanagementconference.com. Be sure to join us for the next webinar in this series, 5 Ideas Your Automation Framework Needs Right Now, by Paul Grossman on August 31st from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. To learn more about this and other webinars in the series, go to www.qualitymanagementconference.com. You may submit your questions at any time using your question box in your GoToWebinar window. Today's presenter will answer as many questions within the time allowed at the end of today's session. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available for viewing within 48 hours at www.qualitymanagementconference.com. At the end of today's webinar, you will be asked to complete a short survey. At IIST, we strive to provide the highest quality educational resources for the public and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete this short survey. I will now turn the webinar over to today's presenter, Jennifer Bonine. Jennifer?
Perfect. Thanks, Eric. Well, welcome, everyone. Today we're going to talk about innovation thinking and just touch on getting you guys started on thinking outside the box and being a little innovative. So I have a few questions to kind of get you guys thinking right out of the box here on our webinar today. So in your organizations, the first question I would ask is, what do you focus on and what matters most to you in those organizations? Is it values or results? And what I mean by that is, in organizations, sometimes we stick to these core values that we adhere to as an organization or principles that the organization likes to live by. So that could mean that because of those values, we will turn down opportunities to make revenue, to be able to take on new clients, to do things that we don't think align directly to the values that we adhere to as an organization. In other companies, being that they're driven by the stock market and shareholders and a board of directors, what they're looking at is the bottom line, and they're looking at results. And so what's really the focus is, what are we doing, how are we doing it, and are we getting the results we want out of the organization? So we're very results-oriented or results-focused. So what I would ask as we go through these first few questions in the beginning of our time together today, that you guys just internally take some time to think. A lot of us are extremely busy in our day-to-day work and the things that we're doing, and we don't get as much time as we used to just sit and kind of think about, you know, some of the key things that drive our organizations. And when we talk about innovation and becoming more innovative, it's very important for us to understand what drives our organizations, because whatever's at the heart of the organization is what they're willing usually to support from an innovation perspective. So you want to make sure that the core of who you are as an organization aligns to the ideas or the things that you're proposing as new innovations for your team and for your company, and, you know, making sure that those things are in nice alignment. So again, I'll ask a few more here. So hopefully you guys, since I can't see all of you, hopefully you're all thinking about these. The next one is today really more important than tomorrow? I'm sure all of us can probably relate to the idea that a lot of times we're very in the moment focused. So we're focused on the next release getting out the door. We're focused on the next sprint that we have to deliver, the next piece of work. And we don't always get that time to pull up and do more strategic work as a leader, as an individual contributor. We're really just focused on the tactical and how do we get through today. But what we would say is, you know, for your organization, do you tend to focus more on the day-to-day and the tactical block and tackle of what needs to get done? Or are you guys really looking out and focus 2 years down the line, 4 years down the line, 6 years down the line? What do we need to be doing now to position ourselves to be ready for those times in a few years from now? And a lot of us don't always get that time to focus on tomorrow and being more strategic. So I think about that, just in terms of we put a lot of focus on today, but is that really more important than focusing on where we need to be and ensuring that we have a place tomorrow? There's a lot of organizations that didn't foresee the ultimate demise coming until it was too late. If you look at some very large organizations that no longer are in existence, if we think of, the circuit cities of the world, right, where they looked like they were doing fine, weren't looking far enough out to what the future had to look like, and then ultimately end up not having the future that they thought they would have. So again, it's important to focus on both tactical, because you need to get done what you need to get done today, but you also have to set aside that time, especially when you're trying to innovate, to be more strategic and look at where you need to be and how that fits into the bigger picture. And then how important is growth to you as an organization? A lot of organizations will say, we want to grow, and this is the pace we want to grow at. You'll have targets that they're asking you to achieve, saying, we want to grow revenues by X percentage. We want to grow the organization and our staff by X percentage year over year. So you have to understand, when you're looking at innovation, how important is that growth really to your company? What are they driving at? So when you put in a new idea or when you're trying something out for the first time, how fast do they expect it to take hold? How fast do you expect to see results? Again, in highly results-driven organizations, a lot of times what you'll see is they're going to expect results almost immediately. So you, as the person wanting to be innovative and creative in the new things you're trying, have to manage those expectations of how quickly that will happen and when realistically you'll see a result from the change that you're proposing to put into the organization. So again, it's all about making sure you set those expectations. And depending again on your organization, growth may be really important and they want to see results very quickly. So you have to understand what's important to the executives who are making those decisions on whether to invest or not invest in some of the ideas that you're proposing. How long are they willing to wait for these investments to pay off? So again, when we think of it in terms of now our sporting teams, a lot of teams invest in young players, right? Not knowing really what they're going to turn out to be. They're looking at them in high school and college and saying, what do we think is going to happen? And we're going to invest now and give it years to pay off. Some of you may not be in an organization or a business that's willing to wait long for investments to pay off. Their time frame for when they expect to see results may be within a month, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, within a year. But when you embark on innovation and new techniques of trying new things in your teams and organizations, you really need to have a good handle on how long your executives are willing to wait to see the payoff from whatever it is that you're embarking on. Because one of the things that we find sinks innovation or sinks new ideas is not setting the expectation again up front of how long it's actually going to take for that investment to pay off. I work with a lot of organizations that are trying new things for the first time. It may be, and to some of you who've been doing this a long time, it may seem silly that this could be the case, but there are still organizations and companies out there who primarily all of their quality assurance and testing functions are distributed and reside amongst the business users. They don't yet have a dedicated group that focuses on it. So as that type of group and organization is getting built, you have to understand how long it's going to take before you really see the results of having that dedicated centralized team that's focused on quality in your organization. And you have to set those expectations with leaders up front. Same thing when you look at continuous integration or continuous improvement methodologies and looking at, how are we going to, look at how we continuously build in new ways of doing things, refine and tweak our strategies, making sure that as we build in the automation into our releases, how long it's going to take before that pays off and when they'll start to see that investment. And, you know, keeping people aware that it's not just the initial investment, right, but it's the ongoing investment to ensure that you can continue to support whatever it is that you've started as an organization. So it's not a lot of times a one-time, you pay your money and you're done. With a lot of the things that we're talking about, especially in the technology space, you know, it's the ongoing maintenance of that as well as the building upon it that you have to focus on. And both of those aspects and the investment to do both so that you don't lose what you initially invested. When I talk about innovation, there's really a couple steps that I like to talk about in terms of making sure your innovation is effective inside your organizations. The first step is really around exploring and discovering what your organization is all about. You know, understanding those key questions of who are we as an organization and what do we value, so that you can align your innovation efforts to what's valued in your organization, what people are willing to invest in, and then what people are willing to wait for. So that first step is really what we did in a very abbreviated way today, which is kind of just asking some key questions to explore and discover what your organization's tolerance is for new innovation and where they stand. Once you have a good handle on that, the second step is really learning how to recognize and appreciate the difference between what's core to your business and what you do, and what's the context functions that you have that you do as well. And I'll go into a little detail today in the time that we have explaining more about core and context so that you can put that into perspective in terms of your organizations. After you understand core and context, the next piece we have to focus on is how do you actually change or adapt behavior to prioritize your innovation efforts more effectively. A lot of times what can be challenging for us is we try and focus on too many things, or we spread out our investment for innovation across lots of different projects, thinking, well, one of these will pay off. So even if the first one isn't effective, maybe this other one will work. And we kind of, you know, spread out our investment to try and reduce our risk. In effect, what that actually does for us when we do that is it really doesn't create the effective focus on the innovation that you're trying to have. So it's very important when you do this to make sure you're focused on innovations that are going to add value and you're not diluting what you're working on for either you or your teams. And the last step is making sure you actually, when you come up with these things, put in actionable plans to move them forward and to show progress so that people see something is actually happening and you keep it in their conscience of here's the new stuff we're doing, and they're seeing that change. Now there's different types of innovation, and these are the three main types of innovation when I talk about innovation that I think of. So just to give you a frame of reference, on this graph here what you'll see is on the left side is the level of value add it has to the organization or company, and then across the bottom, the level of sophistication that your organization has. So ideally, being in the far right-hand quadrant is good, where you have high value add and a high level of sophistication in your innovation and how you're going about that. When we talk about event-driven, capability-driven, and system-level innovation, I'm going to describe those for you so you can get a picture of where you think the organizations that you work for resides on that spectrum. So if we look at it, level one, innovation as an event. This is where the majority of companies will tend to live in terms of their innovation strategies. This would be if you have an organization where you have random contests to generate new ideas, you have a hackathon once a year or periodically. You have some brainstorming sessions where people get together and they talk about how to focus on a new area that you guys want to work on inside of your products or your technologies. And then if you guys have a good idea, there may be some value add to the organization, but really the results are episodic and temporary rather than sustainable and pervasive. So what you tend to see is you have these bursts of innovation. And it's really events that are driven, and then they kind of taper off. And then you'll kind of bring it up again, and you'll have another event, and it kind of tapers off. So it's very temporary. It's not real sustainable, and it's not your way of thinking. So again, you have to kind of, do it at a point in time, but it's not in your DNA of your organization and how you think every single day. Now, when you move to the second level, which is the next level of maturity, this is innovation as a capability. And this is really that next level of sophistication around innovation. This is where organizations put in place structures and processes to help define the problems that they have and generate and evaluate solutions. You're developing action plans around those solutions. You have realistic deliverables based on a challenge you're facing or an opportunity that you have, and you're monitoring them on an ongoing basis. So again, you're taking it from just that very event, temporary fix, to something where you're actually have a way to assess, look at, develop action plans, and then monitor ongoing. The most mature type of innovation that we see is innovation as a system. This is like the top level of innovation where it involves an environment where it's just embedded in everything everyone does. And it's part of the culture of the organization. It's part of what people do. It's part of how they deal with what's happening. So they're using both the events, they're using the capability where it's more structured, they're using these events that help them come up with new ideas. But what you'll tend to see is this is really a systematic way of going about and just living as an organization where you're continuously and sometimes radically improving things, your processes, your organization, and just continuing to add exceptional ongoing value both for consumers as well as the people that work in those organizations. So again, if we go back to the chart we looked at, event is kind of that lowest level of innovation capability in an organization where you're really just kind of doing it when you can, but it's not ongoing. Capability, you're moving to that next level of maturity, and systemic means it's basically how you operate as a company, and it's in part of what you do as an organization. So what I want you to take a minute and do now is, obviously you guys were interested in learning more about innovation for a reason, and what I always say is, if you keep it simple around what you're trying to achieve and succinct, it's easier to remember what you want to do at the end of the day and what your strategy is around innovation. So the whole idea behind Twitter and making sure that you keep your thoughts succinct and get out a succinct thought was to make sure it was easy to understand what someone was trying to convey. So I'd ask you just to take a minute and think about, in your organization, what is your strategy around innovation? You may be a leader in an organization, you may be an individual contributor. What is your strategy or your current approach to innovation? So just maybe take a minute and think about that. A minute will probably seem like forever because a lot of us don't take time during the day to actually stop and think about these things. So just I'll give you a short amount of time here to think about that before we move on. All right. So hopefully that gave you a chance to think about, just briefly, about what your strategy is and what you're focused on. So let's talk a little bit before we move on about perception, because perception plays a key role in people's way they view change and the way they view innovation. So we all see the world a little bit differently from the way others see it sometimes. And we all tend to view innovation in our own way. Whereas someone will say, that's really innovative, someone else may say, well, that doesn't seem very innovative to me. And we'll all have our own opinions about it. Now, some of you may have seen this picture before. I use this just as an illustration of perception because the first thing that jumps out at us can be different depending on how we view the world and how we see this picture. We're all looking at an identical photo or picture, but when we look at it, we each see something different, potentially, or you may see two things. So the two things that are in this picture, in case you don't see it, there's an older woman who has, the large pointy nose. She kind of looks like one of the Disney characters or Disney villains. And then some of you may actually be saying, I don't see an old woman at all, but what I see is a younger woman with her profile and her head turned sideways. So you're seeing the side of the younger woman. Some of you may be able to see both images. But our brain and the way we perceive things starts when we're very young. It's like a movie reel. We're capturing data and information from the time that we're born all the way until the time we're no longer around. And we're capturing that information, processing it, forming our own opinions and beliefs about it, and then making judgments on things. So when we look at things, we don't always see them the way the person next to us will see them. You guys may have experienced this before when you're actually sitting in a meeting and you're talking about a topic, and you come away from that meeting with an idea of what you think was accomplished or what you think the key takeaways were. Someone may have been taking notes in that meeting and actually sends the notes out after the meeting. And when you read through the notes, you go, wow, that wasn't what my key takeaway was from that. A lot of what's happening is we each have this unique lens or view on how we're taking in and perceiving information and data. It's the same thing here with innovation. So we all see it slightly differently, and that's why sometimes when we propose ideas or ways of doing things that there won't be complete agreement from everyone. So we have to be aware of that we will have people when we're proposing things that don't agree with us or have a different way that they view it. So just want to keep in mind that as you go through innovation, you're definitely going to see people with different perceptions, different perspectives on what you're trying to achieve. Now we'll look at a photo. So when I show this photo, hopefully everyone knows who this is. Different people have different perspectives on this. So if you read some of what comes out on Apple is people say, was the passing of Steve Jobs the demise of Apple, and will they be able to keep up their market share and their creativeness and their innovativeness without his thought leadership? Or was it really all of the folks around Steve that created that thought leadership? So there again, different perspectives and different perceptions around, is it that person that was innovative? Is it the people around them that were innovative? Was it what they set up and the level of creativity that they allow that creates that innovation? What's really driving that? But we'll all sometimes have a different opinion on that. And again, if you come to the conference that Eric mentioned in the beginning, this will be a longer class where we'll get an opportunity to really interact on digging into, innovation and where it comes from. So let's consider for a moment just a couple of companies and talk about the ways that they're being innovative. I don't know how many of you have seen the new commercials that are coming out for Select Comfort. So if you're not familiar, Select Comfort is an organization or a company based in Minnesota. They actually patented sleep number technology, which means that you can have two folks that sleep on the same bed but sleep on a very different mattress based on their sleep number. So it adjusts based on your weight, your distribution, lots of different factors. So there's a lot of technology built into their sleep number beds. And one of the things that they actually did to innovate on their product, besides just providing your basic bed where you could change the firmness or the softness of the bed, was they actually partnered up with some sleep specialists and doctors and put in some new technologies that are actually changing how people are able to sleep and the quality of their sleep. So they actually put in some new snoring technology where the bed will automatically adjust when it senses that the person laying on the bed is snoring, so that it'll move up the head of the bed just enough so that that person stops snoring. Doesn't sound like it would be very impactful, but it's usually impactful, number one, to the person who's not getting as good a sleep as they could, and to the other person who's being impacted by the noise level of that person actually snoring next to them. They say one of the main reasons couples actually don't spend the night in the same room is because of a spouse that snores. So Select Comfort said, let's try and solve that challenge and that problem and create a better standard of living for people who use our products. The other thing that they did was they noticed that people would complain about tripping at night or stubbing their toe on the end of their bed. How many of you have ever done that when it's dark and you're trying to turn on the lights, or trying to get up early in the morning to catch a flight and you can't see? So what they've actually done is when you put your feet down on your side of the bed, it has sensor lights that actually turn on so that you can see when you're getting out of bed and not trip. Various things like that. But again, when you look at what Select Comfort does, they make beds, but they said, how do we innovate upon that to add extra value to our consumers? And behind all of that is the technology organization that was part of that. So a lot of us say, well, I'm in QA, or I'm in development, or I'm in project management, and I don't get that involved in that piece. But really, these organizations that have innovation built into them utilize all job roles and everyone in the organization to help consider, how do we continue to add value and be part of that value add to the people who are buying or using whatever it is that we're creating as a company. What you'll also see in different organizations is, rather than building new technology like Select Comfort did, is you buy. So some of you may be in organizations where acquisition is the primary method of moving things forward or gaining innovation quickly. So rather than having to develop those innovations, which can take months to years to do, you go out and you purchase a new product line, or you purchase an organization or a company that has the innovation that you want to focus on. So it gives you a way to more quickly integrate innovation without having to develop all of that yourselves. What you'll also see is sometimes they'll keep those new products separate, so that the market space thinks that it's actually a different company when in fact they're all owned by the same organization. And then you have things like Coca-Cola, where one of their new strategies is they have a lot of stable product lines that they've had for a long time, but as the market's shifting, right, less and less people are drinking soda. So the soda market is actually on the decline. Less and less people are saying that that's a healthy choice for them or their families. They've diversified their product line to now brand Coca-Cola as a beverage for everyone, because they own vitamin water, they own coconut waters, they own various fruit juices and other products, so that even if people don't want carbonated sodas or beverages, they have something else that they may like that fits more in line with just waters or flavored waters or things that they can be supportive of, so they're still in the Coca-Cola family, but they're a different product line. And then, not sure how many of you have got wind of this, but if you have children, this will be interesting to you. So there's some food companies that obviously have to figure out every day how to evolve and evaluate new product lines. Now, as we're getting into back to school season here, and with September quickly upon us, and some of you may already have, depending on where you are in the US, your kids may already be back in school. They have gone to, there was a big craze around not having high fructose corn syrup in things because it's not as good for you as pure cane sugar or real sugar. So what you've seen is a shift, right? Fundamental shift in how things are produced and what the ingredients actually are in those things, because the market is becoming more conscious. So what you'll see is brands like Capri Sun and the juice boxes now advertise no high fructose corn syrup, no artificial colors and flavors, putting in more of those natural ingredients to what's been a stable product for a lot of years, but evolving them to fit the growing and changing needs of consumers. The other thing that you will start seeing, if you have not seen it already, which is the one that I think is incredibly interesting for consumers, is Kraft Mac and Cheese. So Kraft, as we may all know, depending on your age when you grew up, is known for that neon orange color that it has, but it doesn't come by that very naturally. That's actually an incredibly artificial way to make something that color. So there are a lot of artificial colors and flavorings that are built into mac and cheese, and as an outcry from some of the consumers and the parents out there, they're talking about creating a new formula where they will actually change the color, which will inevitably, when you take that stuff out, change the taste, changes a lot of things. But as we all know, kids come to know and rely on their mac and cheese and what that looks like and what it tastes like and what to expect. So as you're making tweaks in your innovation or you're changing things up on people, you also have to be careful, because there are some things that just work. And when you tweak too many things, sometimes you don't get the desired result you want or the outcome. So it's keeping in mind of how to make the right amount of change in innovation, but still stay true to what it is that people value about what you're providing. So whether that's you're in quality assurance and it's the service of providing quality, you want to tweak it, but you want to make sure at the end of the day they still see the value in what you're delivering. Now, those of you out there, some of you may know what Autodesk is. So Autodesk is known for AutoCAD software. So it's their bread and butter. It's how they made their initial money, was the AutoCAD software. That's a design software that basically allows architects and builders and graphic designers and other folks to create structures, to do models, to do prototypes. But Autodesk has actually branched out into some other areas. Autodesk actually has the 3D printing capabilities where they're actually exploring things like printing out a virus, printing out food, so putting in different materials to be able to print handbags, to be able to print clothing, that can actually be worn and used. So it's amazing to see how a company that maybe had its core in one area has said, now with innovation, we're branching that core out and we've got these other areas that we can focus on as well. So again, just more things to think about in terms of what's happening out there around some of the innovation coming, and maybe how your company is focusing as well to continue to diversify and keep up. I talked about this a little bit in the beginning when we started our session today. You have to be careful about innovation. Too many initiatives and bubble up management where you're having people focus on too many different things is a zero-sum game. We usually don't end up seeing any material value or result out of doing that. It's distributing the focus too widely and not having enough focus to be able to actually achieve a change. You don't want to have too many initiatives that are being focused on too broadly so that you're not really achieving anything. So one takeaway I would hope that you all get is make sure you know what all the innovation initiatives that you have going on are, or the change initiatives that you have going on for your teams or your organization, and keep track of those and see if you actually have too many things that you're trying to focus on at once. Because people inherently, all of us, can only take on so much change at a time. And trying to ask us to do too much of that results in us not knowing what to do or being able to focus. I talked earlier about understanding what your core is and what your context is, and knowing for your teams how much of your time is actually being spent on your core functions versus what's important, but it's contextual actually to what your actual role is. So if we take the example of Tiger Woods at his core and what made him who he is golf. So he's a professional golfer. So his core is to get out there and play golf, or it was before he semi-retires. But his core was golf. And as a result of that, depending on how he performed in that, he had all these other things that he was involved in, but they weren't actually what his core was. His core was golf. And then contextually around that is things like golf product lines, golf sponsorship, games that he was in that he would get endorsements, should be a part of, athletic wear, shoes, any number of things. But at his core, he plays golf. And you have to remember to focus on your core to keep that contextual stuff running, but you really have to know how much time you're spending and focusing on core versus context in your organization. So what I would ask you to do really quickly, again, making us think today, so you have some time. In your teams, what are your core functions? So you can list them just on a piece of paper in front of you. You don't have to put them in your book. If you come to the class, we'll have a book, you can put them in. And then what are the contextual functions that you do? So the other things you have to be engaged in, like it may be design reviews, it may be requirement reviews, it's things outside of the core. So if your core is testing, your core function is we test these products or we test this software. Contextually, we also have to be a part of design reviews, we have to be a part of the requirements review sessions, we have to attend meetings, we have to send emails, we have to do a bunch of other stuff. But think about for a second just what is that core and what are your contextual things and how many contextual things are you actually focused on. And the reason we want to think about this is when you actually look at this, you start to see sometimes why it's so hard to think strategically and to think about innovation because we're so focused on our context and we've lost focus on some of our core and how to improve our core functions. And then if you actually think about what percentage of time you spend on core versus context, that gets even more interesting. When I have these discussions in organizations, what I find intriguing is that let's take a function like a developer, for example. Primary function in the organization is to develop code and to produce code that then is utilized to run their products and their software. When I actually ask a lot of developers, what percentage of time do you spend writing code or developing? The ironic answer is that on average it's less than 1/4 of their time, or 25%. So if you think about that in a week, out of a 40-hour average work week, now a lot of us work more than that, but if it's a 40-hour average work week, that developer only gets to spend about 10 of those hours actually developing code. The rest of the time is spent on other things like reviews, code reviews, design reviews, meetings, emails, all kinds of various other things that they're expected to do. So I think it's an interesting exercise to actually go through for yourself and your teams and think about what are my core functions, what's all the other stuff I get tasked with that isn't necessarily core, and then how much time do I actually get to spend on my core function of what I'm supposed to be delivering for the organization. So again, something to think about as you're thinking about innovation and how much time you actually get to spend on your core function and innovating for your core function. When we look at innovation, there's different ways that companies adopt technology and their tolerance for new technology. What you will tend to find is these main categories, and the chart that you're actually seeing on the screen represents a relative percentage of organizations and where they fall. So when we talk about new technologies coming out and the quickness with which people are willing to adopt it, there's those techies that are out in front and they're saying, let's just try it. They're some of the first ones to go and say, let's try this new thing out and let's see what it does for us as an organization. They're going to be way out in front. Smaller percentage of organizations willing to invest and do that, but there's a group of them out there. Then you'll see right behind them is visionaries. They want to get ahead of the pack, the majority of people, but they're not going to just try it to try it. They're going to say, I need to make sure this makes sense. I need to make sure it has a proper business value. I need to make sure it's going to be what our consumers are going to want. Things like wearables, right? Not everyone has gotten on board with wearables. They're waiting to see if it's a fad, if it's something that comes or goes. Some of the visionaries are saying, what can we do with wearables and how would we be able to incorporate those into our products for people? Then you've got pragmatists. They're just going to stick with the herd. They're never going to be the ones that are out front, but they're kind of going to be in the middle of that pack around how they adopt technology and what their strategy is. So your organization may fall more into that pragmatist of, we're not going to be bleeding edge. We're kind of going to be in the middle. We're going to wait and make sure there's a couple people who've tried it before. So when you guys attend conferences or get new ideas, why this information is important is to plot yourself and your company on where you tend to reside. Because if you guys are conservative or skeptics and you're really adverse to new technologies or strategies, you have to be cautious about what innovation you're actually proposing in that organization. Because they may not be willing to adopt it the same way as if you went into an organization where they're going to go, oh, it's new, we'll just try it. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll do something else. So you really have to know where your organization gets plotted on here. So again, think about where you would fall as an organization and then make sure whatever innovation strategies you're talking about aligns to where you fall as an organization. Now here's different types of innovation if you're in a growth market. Hopefully most of your companies and organizations are in that growth type of market. So what you look at then for types of innovation that you want to target is you look at your market and you say, are we in a new market or is it existing? So is this a brand new type of product or market, or is it an existing market? Is the product new or is the product existing and you're just building upon it? And then what you do, based on knowing if your market's new or existing and if the product is new or existing, is you plot where you fall on this chart and decide what type of innovation is most impactful to you and your teams. So, for example, if you're in an existing market that's already out there and you have an existing product, it's all about looking around platform innovation and how do you innovate the platform and with which you deliver that existing product in an existing market. If it's a new market and a brand new product, you want disruptive innovation that completely shakes up the marketplace. Right? So Uber was within technically an existing market which had existing products, but they were very disruptive. So they were going about a new way to market things and a new product that they were going to offer. So they had very disruptive innovation that came in and shook up how people are doing things intentionally, right? Which is creating a lot of issues and lawsuits and talk and things like that, which can be good or bad. But they really went after that disruptive innovation as an example. Now, we thought about, at the beginning of our session, we talked about what's your strategy and what do you want to achieve with innovation. I would ask, come back to that and really think about what it is you want to focus on. Now, based on looking at just some of the things I asked you to look at, such as, what type of market are you in, what type of product do you have that you're trying to develop, and then things like we talked about earlier of what's your tolerance level for new technologies, new strategies, and innovation. Are you a techie on the bleeding edge, or are you someone who's going to hang back and wait and make sure it works before you take advantage of it? And it's interesting, no matter what type of market we're in, we do a lot of work with med device and regulated industries as well. And some people traditionally have said, well, those industries just aren't as innovative as other ones. They're just not as bleeding edge. But what we're tending to find now is that we actually are seeing them get much more innovative, and they're finding ways to get more innovative even with those highly regulated environments that they have. So what I often tell people who attend my classes when we get to spend a whole day together is really don't pigeonhole yourself into I can't do this because I'm hamstrung by the fact that I have regulations, or I'm hamstrung by the fact or don't have the capability to do it because we don't have the funding. If you guys ever watch some of the TED Talks, there's one out there about frugal innovation. And it's about some of the greatest innovations are coming out now in countries where they don't have access to a lot of resources. They don't have access to a lot of funding or a lot of money to do things. And it actually creates more creativity in how you go about achieving that. So there are some very creative ways to go about having innovation in spite of lack of, large budgets and funding to accomplish it. 7 key activities, I'll leave you with this in terms of for getting your innovation right to think about. So for those of you out there, I know Eric will talk about how to make the slides available, but these are some key activities you need to think about in your teams to make sure you're getting it right. You want to discover inflection points, kind of those key points in what's going to move the needle for you as an organization or as a team. So where are those, and what's going to be key for you in those areas to change and focus on those. You want to build capacity. So you want to build a team of people who understand innovation, the value of it, and how to use it systemically in their day-to-day life, of constantly pushing the envelope to think about how could we do this differently? Is there a better way we could go about it? What are some of the things we could do differently? You want to make sure you gather the right intelligence around what you're doing. So gather the facts and the data to make sure that you're doing the right things, that it fits your company or your organization, that you're not looking at an innovation that your company simply, while it would work in a different company, just won't work in yours because of your culture or the way that your organization operates. There's a lot of good ideas out there, but it doesn't mean it works for everyone and every company based on how that company operates. Shift your perspective. Get outside of your box. Try different things. Make sure that you're not looking at it from the same angle all the time. Exploit disruption. So things like Uber did, right? What are the disruptive things that can help? Make sure you generate value and drive uptake. So driving uptake is all about how do you continue to get more people engaged and involved. I'm leaving my email, so if any of you want to contact me, have more questions. Obviously, in today's session, we have very limited amount of time together, so that gives you an alternate way to contact me if you have questions that we don't get to. And I will open it up to questions. Eric, if we have any questions, I don't see any yet in our question box.
I don't see anything yet, Jennifer, but let's just give it a minute here just to see if anyone has any last minute questions. Not to put you on the spot, Jennifer, but do you have any typical questions that that you get in this webinar that could be helpful to the listeners?
A lot of people will ask me about, how do you get started if your company isn't doing anything right now around driving innovation. And one of the things I say, I did mention it, but is, even if you're not doing anything, start creating those events where people can get outside the box and have set aside time to start being more creative. There's actually an innovation activity that I recommend that will actually be in the slides that I use for the class, but there's some activities you can use to drive that innovation thinking and brainstorming in teams. So for those of you that have team meetings or host team meetings, I do have a good activity. If you want to email me, I can get it to you around how to create the start of that innovative thinking, that mindset, and that collaboration that just involves Post-it notes and basically flip charts and some markers. So it's a pretty easy way to get teams that aren't really used to kind of that collaborative outside-the-box innovation, how to get them kind of in that mindset so that they're more willing to do that on a regular basis for you inside of your regular standing meetings that you have as a team.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. I don't see any other questions, so we'll end the webinar now. I want to thank you, Jennifer, for your time today, and I also want to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar sponsored by IIST, the leaders in education-based certifications and training. For more information on how IIST could help you or your organization, please visit www.iist.org. You can follow IIST on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube to find out more information about IIST news, events, and promotions. Thank you all again for joining us today, and have a great day.